You ever heard of the Kingdom of Tartaria? Maybe not. Or maybe you stumbled across it in some mysterious corner of the internet. One of those deep dive videos talking about secret empires and ancient maps that they want you to see? Tartaria is one of those names that sounds like it came straight out of a fantasy novel. But surprisingly, it shows up in real historical documents and maps from the 6th and even 18th centuries. So, what's the deal? Was Tartaria a real place, or just another modern conspiracy dressed up as forgotten history? Let's start with the basics. Tartaria was a name Europeans used to describe a massive, mostly unknown region of northern and central Asia. We're talking about areas that now include Russia, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Siberia, and more. Basically, everything that was far away and kind of mysterious got labeled Tart. It was kind of like the here be dragons of cartography. Old maps are where it gets really interesting. Tartaria shows up as a huge territory on many of them. You'll see things like Chinese Tartary, independent Tartary, and even Muscovite Tartary. And here's where the mystery starts to thicken. Despite appearing in tons of historical maps, Tartaria is basically absent from school history books. You don't see it in mainstream history documentaries. It's like this giant piece of the world just vanished. Weird, right? One mainstream explanation is that Tartaria wasn't a real kingdom or empire in the traditional sense. The term was more of a catch-all label Europeans used for the nomadic peoples of Central Asia like the Mongols and Turkic tribes. There wasn't one single government, capital city, or king of town. It's kind of like calling all of South America the Amazon just because it has a lot of forest. But not everyone buys that. In recent years, the internet has breathed new life into the mystery of Tartaria, and with it, a flood of conspiracy theories. One of the most popular claims is that Tartaria was a highly advanced civilization with grand architecture, free energy, and technology that rivaled or even surpassed modern times. According to the theory, this entire civilization was deliberately erased from history in a massive Sounds like a sci-fi movie plot, right? But that's part of the appeal. The idea that there was a secret, advanced empire hidden in plain sight that powerful forces worked to hide it pulls people in. It's the historical version of finding a lost city under your house. Supporters of the theory point to elaborate buildings all over the world, especially in Russia, Central Asia, and even the US, and say, look, how could people back then have built this without advanced tech? They compare it to ancient Rome, Egypt, or Greece, and suggest that Tartaria was on that same level. Maybe even higher. Of course, historians have more grounded explanations. Neoclassical architecture, for example, was super popular in the 18th and 19th centuries. Grand columns, domes, and symmetrical buildings were in style. Empires wanted to look powerful, and building majestic structures was a way to show off. There's nothing particularly mysterious about it unless you're looking for a mystery. One curious part of this theory involves World's Fairs from the 1800s. Conspiracy theorists say these events were used to reveal Tartarian architecture to the public under the guise of temporary exhibitions. Then, they claim, the buildings were destroyed to hide the truth. A favorite example is the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, which featured stunning neoclassical buildings. There's no way they built that in just 2 years, they say, but they did. We have blueprints, photos, worker logs. It's well documented. So, if everything has a rational explanation, why do people still talk about Tartaria? Because mystery is magnetic. We're naturally drawn to the unknown. And let's face it, there are still plenty of gaps in our historical record. Civilizations do disappear. Documents get lost. And where there's a blank space, our imagination fills in the rest. In some parts of modern Russia, the idea of Great Tartaria has even been used as a kind of alternative national identity and ancient, powerful legacy that predates modern empires. After all, having a mysterious and glorious past is a great way to inspire pride, even if it's built more on myth than on facts. But here's where things get tricky. There's a fine line between being curious and falling into misinformation. Exploring Tartaria can lead you to fascinating studies of ancient cartography, Asian history, and cultural exchange. But it can also suck you into a world of unfounded theories that discredit actual research and real historians. So, was Tartaria real? Well, yes and no. Real people lived in those regions. Rich cultures thrived there. But there's no solid evidence of a lost super empire with futuristic tech and free energy towers. What we do have is a complex history filled with misunderstandings, shifting borders, and centuries of explorers trying to make sense of lands they didn't fully understand. And honestly, that's still pretty amazing. The story of Tartaria teaches us more about ourselves than anything else. It shows how much we crave the unknown, how we turn gaps in knowledge into epic tales, and how history is always a bit more complicated and more interesting than what we read in textbooks. So next time you come across the word Tartaria on an old map or in a late-night YouTube rabbit hole, don't dismiss it outright, but also don't accept every theory at face value. Somewhere between legend and reality is where the real adventure lies. And that, my friend, is where the best mysteries love to hide.